I never thought I'd set foot back in Millersfield again. After my parents passed, my brother and I inherited their old house, a creaky, sun-faded place at the edge of town. We let it sit for years, too busy or too reluctant to deal with it. But finally, with a buyer lined up and a list of paperwork waiting, it was time to come back and say goodbye for good. The town hadn't changed much. Same cracked sidewalks, same sleepy shops. I wandered downtown after a long morning at the house, just needing some air, when I nearly collided with someone outside the corner store. "Whoa, sorry," he said, steadying me. I looked up, and blinked. It took a second to register the familiar face, a little older but still unmistakably him. "Tony?" I said before I could even think. His face lit up with that same crooked grin I remembered from high school. "Ashley?" "No way." We stood there for a second, both of us laughing, awkward but somehow natural. After all these years, after all the life that had happened since then, here we were, two ghosts of our younger selves running into each other like it was nothing. He scratched the back of his neck, like he always used to when he was nervous. "Hey, you wanna grab a coffee? Catch up a little?" I hadn't had coffee yet, and before I even thought about it, I blurted, "Yeah, sure." It wasn't just the caffeine I needed, it was the excuse to keep standing there, talking to him. We ended up at the old diner near the square, the one where teenagers used to cram into booths after football games. It even smelled the same, burnt coffee and pancakes. We slid into a booth by the window, and for a while it felt easy. Comfortable. We caught up on the basics, where we lived now, what we did for work, who we'd become. He told me he'd stayed in town, taken over his dad's auto shop after he passed. I told him about the city, about my job in marketing, about how fast everything moved these days. At one point, he looked at me across the table, really looked at me, and it was like time folded in on itself. Like for a second, we were just Ashley and Tony again, the two kids who thought they had the whole world figured out. "I can't believe I ran into you," he said, smiling over the rim of his coffee cup. "Me neither," I said, feeling my heart stumble a little. "But I'm glad you asked." I took a sip of my coffee, feeling the warmth settle in my chest, and figured I owed him a little more of the story. "I'm actually only here for a few days," I said, tracing my finger around the rim of the mug. "My brother and I are selling our childhood home. The one out on Maple Drive." Tony's eyes softened with something like recognition. "I remember that place. Big old house with the green shutters, right?" "Yeah," I said, smiling a little at the memory. "It's been sitting empty for years. We kept putting it off, saying we'd figure it out next year. I guess we finally ran out of excuses." He nodded, leaning back in the booth. "That's tough. Letting go of a place like that." "It is," I admitted. "It's strange. Every corner of that house is a memory. I walked through it this morning and it felt like I was stepping into a life that doesn't fit me anymore." For a moment, he didn't say anything. Just looked at me in that way he used to, not rushing to fill the silence, just letting it be there, letting me breathe. "I know the feeling," he said finally. "Sometimes it's not just the house you're letting go of. It's the people you used to be when you lived there." I swallowed hard, feeling an unexpected lump in my throat. "Yeah," I said quietly. "Exactly." He gave me a small, crooked smile, the same one that used to make my heart race back when life was simpler. "If you want," he said, almost shyly, "after coffee I could drive you out there. Take the long way. Show you how the town's changed." I hesitated, my mind flickering to my tight schedule, my to-do list, the 1,000 things waiting for me. But sitting there across from him, with the past brushing up against the present in a way that felt almost magical, I found myself saying, "Yeah. I'd like that." We finished our coffee and stepped out into the afternoon sun. The air smelled like fresh-cut grass and warm pavement, the way it always did in late spring around here. Tony's truck was parked just down the street, an old blue Chevy that looked like it had as many stories as he did. The ride started off easy, windows down, radio low. Familiar roads blurred past us, but every once in a while, something caught my eye: the old library with its crumbling steps, the corner where the ice cream shop used to be, the empty lot that once held the movie theater we used to sneak into. You remember that night we got caught climbing out of the drive-in? Tony said, glancing over with a grin. I laughed, the memory blooming so vividly it was like no time had passed. You're the one who thought you could hop a 10-foot fence in one jump. Hey, you went along with it, he teased. Only because you dared me, I shot back, nudging him playfully. He chuckled, a deep sound that stirred something old and sweet in my chest. For a while, we traded memories like that, small, stupid things that mattered way more back then than they should have. It was easy, so easy, to slip back into the rhythm we once had. As we pulled onto Maple Drive, my heart gave a strange, uncomfortable twist. The house stood just where I'd left it, but it looked smaller somehow. Sadder. Like it knew we were coming to say goodbye. Tony parked across the street and cut the engine. For a moment, neither of us said anything. We just sat there, staring at it. I used to walk you home from school, he said quietly, his voice almost getting lost in the warm breeze. We'd sit on your porch and talk until your dad started flicking the porch light on and off. I smiled, feeling a tightness in my chest. Yeah. You were always terrible at saying goodnight. He shrugged, looking over at me with a half-smile. I didn't want to. I turned back to the house, the memories rushing in, Christmas mornings, summer spent sprawled on the front lawn, whispered teenage secrets under the stars. And Tony was woven into more of them than I'd ever realized until now. I don't think I ever thanked you, I said suddenly, surprising myself. For being there. For making those years better than they would have been. He looked at me for a long moment, something unspoken flickering in his eyes. You don't have to thank me, he said. You were the best part of it. We sat in his truck for a while longer, just watching the house soak in the afternoon sun. Neither of us seemed ready to break the moment, but eventually, reality started to creep back in, schedules, responsibilities, the ticking clock of everything waiting to be done. Tony drummed his fingers lightly on the steering wheel, then glanced over at me. You said you're here for a few more days, right? Yeah, I nodded. I'm meeting with the realtor and the attorney, but other than that, not much planned. Mostly just sorting through old memories. He smiled, that easy, familiar smile that used to make my heart trip over itself. Maybe we could catch up again? Grab dinner or something, if you're free? I hesitated, not because I didn't want to, but because the idea felt a little dangerous in the way old emotions can sneak up on you. Still, before I could second-guess myself, I found myself smiling back. I'd like that. We both reached for our phones at the same time and laughed. I gave him my number, and he gave me his. Simple, casual, but somehow it felt like more than just a polite gesture. As I tucked my phone back into my bag, I realized my heart was beating a little faster than it should have been. Text me, I said, opening the door. Let's figure something out. I will, he promised, his voice low and sure. I stepped out onto the sidewalk, the late sun casting long shadows behind me. I turned back once, just for a second, and caught him still watching me from the truck, an unreadable look on his face. And for the first time in a long time, something inside me, something I didn't even know was still there, stirred awake. The next afternoon, just as I was finishing up some paperwork with the realtor, my phone buzzed. Tony, still up for lunch? I make a mean grilled cheese. Or at least, I used to. I smiled before I even realized it, typing back quickly. Me, sounds perfect. Where should I meet you? Tony, come by my place. It's nothing fancy, but the food's good. He sent the address, and before I could talk myself out of it, I was in my rental car, winding through the quieter side of town where the streets curled under big old oak trees and front porches sagged with age and comfort. His house was a small, cozy-looking place with a wide porch and a battered red toolbox sitting by the front steps. When he opened the door, he was barefoot, wearing jeans and a plain white t-shirt that somehow made him look exactly like the boy I remembered, and yet entirely someone new. Hey, he said, grinning as he stepped aside to let me in. Glad you found it. Inside, the house felt warm and lived in. Framed photos on the walls, friends, family, a few fishing trips and old cars. Nothing flashy, nothing staged. Just real. The kitchen smelled amazing, buttery and rich, and I laughed when I saw 2 plates already set out on the small wooden table by the window. You weren't kidding about grilled cheese, I said, sliding into a chair. He shrugged, tossing a dish towel over his shoulder. I know what I'm good at. We ate there, sunlight slanting through the window, conversation flowing easy. It wasn't just the food that warmed me, it was him. The way he listened, really listened, like what I said mattered. The way he laughed at all the right moments, made me feel like I hadn't missed a step even after all these years. Somewhere between bites, we drifted into talking about things we hadn't touched yesterday, dreams we had back then, the ones that stuck and the ones that fell away. I told him about the version of me who once thought she'd live in a small town forever. He told me about the version of him who thought he'd have a family by now. There was a moment, a soft one, when our hands brushed reaching for the napkins and we both froze for a heartbeat too long. Neither of us said anything about it. After lunch, he showed me around his place, the half-finished project car in the garage, the tiny backyard with an old oak tree he was trying to keep alive. And somehow, just standing there with him in the soft afternoon light, everything felt right. Familiar. Easy. Thanks for coming, he said when I finally made a move to leave, his voice low. Thanks for inviting me, I said. And I meant it more than I realized. As I drove away, I caught a glimpse of him in the rearview mirror, standing on his porch, watching me go, the same way he used to watch me leave so many years ago. And somewhere deep inside, something whispered that this wasn't the end of it. Not even close. Back at the hotel, the quiet felt heavier than it had before. Maybe it was the way the past had crept back and around the edges, soft and stubborn, refusing to stay buried. I kicked off my shoes, tossed my bag onto the little armchair by the window, and collapsed onto the bed with a sigh. A few minutes later, I grabbed my phone and hit the familiar FaceTime icon. It didn't take long for my husband's face to pop up on the screen, our daughter wiggling into view beside him. Hey, you, he said, smiling. Mommy. Emma squealed, her little hands grabbing at the phone like she could reach through it. I laughed, sitting up straighter. Hey, baby. I miss you so much. We miss you too, my husband said, shifting the phone so I could see more of her. How's everything going out there? I told them about the house, about meeting with the realtor, about the million tiny tasks still waiting for me. I kept it light, careful. There was no reason to bring up the rest, the coffee with Tony, the lunch, the way memories were tangling themselves up in my heart when I wasn't looking. Emma chattered on about school and a new picture she drew, and I soaked it all in, letting the sound of her voice wash over me. Home felt so far away, and yet seeing them, even through a screen, anchored me back to what mattered most. We saved you a cupcake from the party at school, Emma announced proudly. Daddy said we can eat it when you come home. I smiled, feeling the familiar ache of love and longing in my chest. I can't wait, sweetheart. Save me the biggest one, okay? Okay, she giggled. After we said our goodnights and blew exaggerated kisses at each other, the screen went dark. I set the phone down beside me and sat there for a moment, staring at nothing. This was my life now, a husband who loved me, a daughter who needed me, a home built from choices I didn't regret. But somewhere in the quiet, another truth stirred, a piece of myself that belonged to a different time, a different life, and maybe, somehow, to a boy who once sat with me under an oak tree and promised the world. I wasn't sure what to do with that feeling. I wasn't even sure I wanted to know. The next morning, I woke to sunlight filtering through the thin hotel curtains and the steady buzz of my phone vibrating on the nightstand. Bleary-eyed, I reached for it. Tony, hey. Before you head back. Want to meet up one more time? I stared at the message for a long moment, my thumb hovering over the screen. I should have said no. I should have thanked him for the memories, for the kindness, and left it at that. Clean. Simple. But instead, my fingers moved on their own. I'd like that. When and where? The reply came almost instantly. Tony, there's a park just outside of town. By the river. You'll love it. Noon? See you there. I spent the morning packing, trying to stay busy, but my thoughts kept drifting back to him, to the easy way he smiled, the way he made me feel like I still belonged somewhere in a town I hadn't called home in years. By the time I pulled into the dusty little parking lot by the river, my heart was doing that ridiculous thing again, beating too fast, like it remembered something my mind had tried to forget. Tony was already there, leaning against his truck, arms crossed loosely over his chest. He looked up as I got out of the car, and the smile that broke across his face hit me like a punch to the gut, all warmth, all memory, all possibility. "Hey," he said, pushing off the truck and walking toward me. "Hey," I echoed, tucking a loose strand of hair behind my ear. The park was mostly empty, just a few families picnicking in the distance, the river glinting in the sun. We walked side by side without saying much at first, the kind of silence that only felt comfortable when it was with someone who knew you before life got complicated. "You're really leaving tomorrow?" he asked finally, his voice low. I nodded. "Yeah. Early flight." He kicked at a loose stone on the path. "I'm glad we ran into each other." "Me too," I said, and I meant it more than I probably should have. We reached the riverbank and stopped. The water rushed past, steady and endless. For a long moment, we just stood there, letting the breeze pull at our clothes, letting everything we weren't saying hang in the air between us. Finally, he turned to me, his eyes searching mine. "I know you have your life back in New York. Your family. And I'm not trying to mess with that. I just..." He trailed off, shaking his head like he couldn't find the right words. "It's just good to see you again. To remember that some things. Some people, they don't really change." I swallowed hard, feeling something catch in my throat. "I know," I whispered. He smiled, sad and sweet all at once. "Take care of yourself, Ashley. You too, Tony." We hugged then, a real hug, one that said all the things we couldn't. His arms wrapped around me, solid and warm, and for a second, just a second, I let myself sink into it. When we finally pulled apart, there were tears burning behind my eyes, but I blinked them away. I turned and walked back to my car without looking back. Because if I did, I wasn't sure I'd be able to leave. Back in New York, life picked up its usual rhythm, loud, fast, relentless. There were meetings to rush to, ballet classes to get Emma to on time, groceries to haul up the apartment stairs, late-night emails to answer with one tired eye open. On the outside, everything slid back into place like I had never left. But inside, something had shifted. No matter how busy the days got, no matter how many times I told myself to move on, I couldn't shake Tony from my head. His voice, his smile, the way he looked at me like he still saw the girl I used to be, it haunted me in quiet, stubborn ways. Some days it would hit me out of nowhere. Standing in line for coffee and catching the scent of cut grass through an open door. Flipping through an old photo album with Emma and finding a snapshot of me at 16, grinning wide and reckless, a world away from who I was now. Other times, it was smaller. Softer, hearing a song on the radio that we used to blast in his car, or walking past the little park near our apartment and remembering the riverbank, the way the water had sounded rushing by as we said goodbye. I never told my husband. There was nothing to tell, not really, no promises made, no lines crossed. Just a memory. Just a piece of my heart that had stirred awake in a way I hadn't expected and couldn't quite put back to sleep. I loved my life. I loved my family. But there was a part of me now, a small, quiet part, that would always wonder. Not with regret, exactly. Just with the kind of ache you carry when you know you left something beautiful behind because you had to. Sometimes, when the city lights blurred outside my window and the world was soft and half asleep, I'd catch myself smiling without meaning to. Thinking of him. It was one of those quiet nights when everything felt still. The city outside was a soft hum, the faint glow of streetlights flickering like distant stars. Emma was already asleep, her soft breath rising and falling beside me, and my husband was in the kitchen, distracted with work. I was curled up on the couch, scrolling through emails I didn't really need to read when my phone buzzed on the coffee table. I glanced down, not expecting anything. But then I saw the name. Tony. I froze for a second, my thumb hovering over the screen. It had been months. The memory of that last day in town, the river, the hug, the way we left things unsaid, still lingered quietly in the back of my mind. It felt so distant now, like a chapter that had already closed. And yet, seeing his name again made something stir, something I thought I'd tucked away. Tony, hey, Ashley. Just wanted to say hi. Hope everything's good in New York. My heart gave a little jolt at the casualness of it. It was just a text. A simple, polite message. But still, I could feel the weight of it in my hands. The ache, the pull. The possibility. I ran my finger over the screen, reading the words again. I could ignore it. I could delete it without replying. I had a life here. I had my family, my commitments, my future. But what if I just said something back? What if I acknowledged that part of me that still remembered him, the part of me that had never fully let go? I glanced up at the kitchen, where my husband was hunched over his laptop, lost in the glow of the screen. No one would know. No one would understand. It was just a text. Just a few words. But it could also be more. A temptation, a thread that pulled me back to a version of myself that didn't quite fit into the life I'd built. I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of everything on my shoulders. Then I slowly set my phone back down on the coffee table. I stood in the kitchen with my husband, helping him prep dinner, but my mind wasn't really there. I was still holding that text, Tony's message, sitting like a weight in the back of my mind. I told myself it was nothing. Just a quick hello. But the ache was there, still, pulsing softly in my chest. After dinner, when the house grew quieter and my husband retreated to his study, I found myself alone in the living room again. My phone lay on the coffee table, just as it had earlier, its screen still lit up from that moment. I could leave it. I could walk away. But a part of me wasn't ready to let it go. It felt like an unfinished conversation. Like a part of me had been waiting for closure that I'd never gotten. I picked up the phone, unlocking it slowly. My thumb hovered over the message again. The question hung there, did I really want to open that door? I typed. Me, hey, Tony. It's been a while. New York's great, busy as usual. Have you been? I hit send before I could talk myself out of it. The reply came faster than I expected. Tony, I've been good. Life's quieter now, which is different. But I can't complain. It's nice to hear from you. My heart skipped a beat. Nice to hear from you. It was so simple, but it carried so much weight. I found myself typing again, before I could stop myself. Me, I've thought about you a lot. About everything. The second those words were out, I felt the rush of vulnerability. It was more than just a simple check-in. It was an admission. An opening. An invitation to tread somewhere I hadn't dared to before. And then, just as I thought I might have made a mistake, my phone buzzed again. Tony, me too. I've thought about what we had. A lot. I never wanted it to be over. My pulse quickened, the words hanging in the air like something more than a simple exchange. I couldn't help myself. I typed, my fingers trembling a little. Me, what if we hadn't let it go? There was a long pause, and for a moment, I worried maybe I had pushed too far, too fast. But then his reply came through. Tony. Maybe. Maybe we still don't have to. I'm not saying we should forget everything that's happened, but what if we just talked? About what's been in our heads since that day? I read the message again, letting the weight of his words settle over me. My heart was beating a little faster now, and I could feel the pull of something I hadn't expected, the spark of a connection that wasn't finished. Not even close. I swallowed hard. The question hung there, waiting for me to decide. To take the next step, to explore what was left unsaid. I looked around the apartment, my apartment. The life I'd built. And for the first time in a long while, I wondered if there was room for something else. A part of me that had never fully let go of the past. A piece of me that was still tangled up in Tony. I typed back slowly. I think. I think talking might be a good place to start. The message sent. And just like that, we were on the edge of something again. A thread between us, fragile but real. The next morning, I woke up early, my mind still buzzing with the decision I'd made the night before. The text exchanges with Tony replayed in my head like a loop, a mix of excitement and guilt tangled together. I couldn't just ignore it anymore, I couldn't leave things hanging in the air between us. As I moved through the motions of getting ready, I knew I had to tell my husband. I needed him to understand why I was pulling away again, even if just for a short time. It felt like I was drifting away from the life we'd built, and that terrified me. When he came downstairs, his sleeves rolled up as he sipped his coffee, I knew it was time. I need to go back to my hometown, I said, my voice a little quieter than I meant it to be. To finish wrapping up some things with the property deal. It'll just be a couple of days. He looked up, furrowing his brow, a slight hesitation on his face. Isn't everything pretty much settled? You've been away for days already. I know, I replied, tucking my hair behind my ear. But there are a few last things to finalize. I really need to be there to get them done. His gaze softened, and I could see the worry flicker in his eyes, even though he was trying to mask it. Okay. But you'll be back soon, right? We've got plans, and Emma. I'll be back, I interrupted, the words coming out more urgently than I intended. I promise. It's just a few things, and then I'll come straight home. He didn't press it further, but the unspoken question lingered in the air between us. Why the sudden trip? Was there something more to it? I kissed him on the cheek as I grabbed my keys, avoiding his gaze as I turned toward the door. It wasn't like I owed him an explanation. But somehow, I couldn't shake the feeling that the lie tasted bitter on my tongue. A few hours later, I was packing my things into a small bag, the weight of the decision still heavy on my chest. Tony's name hadn't stopped appearing in my mind, and the text from last night was still sitting there, waiting for me to take the next step. I knew I was walking into unfamiliar territory. There was so much I had to lose, but I couldn't ignore the pull, the longing, the curiosity. The flight back to my hometown felt surreal. The airport was a flurry of activity, travelers rushing by, the muffled hum of announcements echoing overhead. But I was focused on one thing, the decision I had made. The pull to go back, to confront a past that had never really let me go. As the plane touched down, I felt a rush of unfamiliar nerves. It wasn't like I hadn't been here before, I grew up in this town, but it had been so many years since I last set foot here. Everything looked the same from the air, the patchwork of small homes, the familiar streets lined with old trees. Yet, it felt different now. I felt like a stranger, even though I had once called this place home. I grabbed my bag from the overhead bin, trying to shake off the unease settling in my chest. I hadn't thought much about the logistics when I decided to come back. The deal with the house was supposed to be quick, just a formality. But there was a part of me that knew I couldn't leave this place without seeing Tony. As I stepped off the plane and into the familiar, bustling terminal, my phone buzzed in my pocket. Tony, are you back in town? I glanced at the message. My pulse quickened just from reading his name again. I typed back quickly, before I could second-guess myself. Just got here. The house is different. Tony, I'm at the same place we met last time. If you want to stop by, I'd like to see you. I hesitated, 1,000 thoughts racing through my mind. There was so much history here, so many things unsaid between us. Yet, the pull of his words, the invitation, felt like a quiet promise. A part of me was unsure, afraid of what it could mean. But the other part, the one that had never really let go of him, couldn't deny the feeling that this was unfinished business. I swallowed and typed back. I'll be there soon. The drive to the park felt longer than it should have, the streets still unfamiliar even though I had walked them 1,000 times in my youth. The world outside the windows blurred as I focused on the text conversation, his words hanging in the air like a question, an invitation. It felt like time had stood still for both of us. When I reached the park near the river, I parked the car and hesitated. The place was the same as it had been years ago, but everything felt different now. More charged. More alive. I walked toward the spot where we'd met all those months ago, my heart thumping louder with each step. Tony was standing near the water's edge, the evening light casting long shadows over his face. He turned when he heard my footsteps, and that familiar smile tugged at his lips. "Hey," he said, his voice warm but hesitant. "Hey," I replied, my own voice betraying the nervousness I felt. "It's good to see you." "You too," he said, taking a step toward me. "I've missed this. Not just seeing you, but this place. It feels like we left something unfinished here, doesn't it?" I nodded, the feeling settling over me as I looked out at the river, the rush of water familiar and soothing. "Yeah. I didn't expect to feel like this. I thought I'd just come back, finalize the deal, and leave. But now, it's different." He looked at me closely, his gaze soft but intense. "We never really got to talk about everything, did we?" "No," I said softly, taking a deep breath. "We didn't. And it's been hard to move on, honestly. I thought I could leave it behind, but I couldn't. Not completely." He took a step closer, his eyes never leaving mine. "I've thought about you a lot, Ashley. I never stopped wondering what might have been if we hadn't walked away." The words hit me harder than I expected, the ache in my chest opening wide again. "I've thought about you too," I admitted, the vulnerability in my voice surprising even me. I didn't know how to let go of what we had. Maybe I still haven't. Tony was quiet for a moment, his gaze drifting to the river. When he spoke again, his voice was low, almost hesitant. "I don't want to let go. Not yet. Not when it feels like we never really had the chance to see what we could have been." My heart raced, the weight of his words sinking deep inside me. The pull between us, the connection, was undeniable, and as I stood there with him, I knew I had a choice to make. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine. I couldn't keep pretending that what we had was just a memory. "I don't know what this means," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "But I don't want to ignore it anymore. Not when it's still here, lingering." Tony stepped closer, the space between us growing smaller. "Then let's talk. Let's figure it out. Together." And just like that, we were no longer just two people from the past. We were something more, standing on the edge of a new beginning. The night was quieter than I expected. The sound of the river flowing just beyond us had a calming, almost hypnotic quality. As Tony and I stood there, words stopped being enough. We'd spent so long talking around everything that it felt like our bodies were speaking for us now, communicating things that our words couldn't quite reach. Before I knew it, I was in his arms. The distance between us was gone, and the warmth of his touch felt both familiar and like something new. I hadn't realized how much I missed being this close to him. It felt like something deep inside me was coming alive again. He kissed me, slow at first, as if testing to see if I would pull away. But I didn't. I didn't want to. I hadn't allowed myself to think about him this way in years, not after everything that had happened. But standing there, in the place where it all began, all I could think about was how much I had longed for this, even without realizing it. The pull was too strong to resist. We didn't say anything more. We didn't need to. Words had already been said. This was just the next chapter, the thing we had both been denying for so long. Later, in the quiet of the house, the dim light of the evening creeping through the window, I lay there beside him, trying to process what had just happened. What had we just done? I wasn't sure where this would lead. I didn't know how to explain it to myself, let alone anyone else. But what I did know as that I couldn't pretend this wasn't something real. I didn't want to regret it, but I also couldn't shake the feeling that this could change everything. Tony shifted beside me, pulling me closer, his hand gently brushing through my hair. "I've wanted this for so long, Ashley," he whispered. "I've thought about this moment over and over. Not just tonight, but what we could have had, what we still could." His words sent a shiver down my spine. I wanted to respond. To tell him I felt the same way. But my thoughts were still swirling. This wasn't just a fleeting moment. It was bigger than that. And I wasn't sure if I was ready to face what it meant. As the warmth of the moment began to fade, a sharp sting of guilt settled in my chest. The soft rustling of the sheets, the quiet stillness in the room, it was all so real, yet in the back of my mind, I couldn't shake the truth. My life, my family, was back in New York. My husband, my daughter, everything I had worked so hard to build, the weight of it crashed down on me. What had I done? I closed my eyes, trying to push the thoughts away, but they kept resurfacing, clawing at my conscience. I pulled away from Tony just enough to look him in the eyes. My heart ached as I spoke the words that felt like a confession. I shouldn't have done this. I feel guilty. I have a husband. I have a daughter in New York. His expression shifted, the softness in his eyes giving way to concern. I get it, Ashley. I understand. But don't you think we deserve to have something real for once, even if it's just for this moment? I nodded, but the words didn't make the guilt go away. My husband, David, had been nothing but supportive, and Emma, our little girl, was the light of my life. How could I reconcile that with what I had just done? The betrayal felt heavy, like a weight around my neck. I whispered, my voice trembling. But I feel like I've abandoned them. Like I've betrayed everything we've built. Tony reached out, gently taking my hand. You're not abandoning them. You're just feeling something you haven't allowed yourself to feel in a long time. Maybe it's not about abandoning them. Maybe it's about finding out who you are again, outside of all the roles you've been playing. His words were soothing, but they didn't make the guilt disappear. I hadn't expected this feeling of being torn between two lives, two versions of myself, but it was impossible to ignore now. I don't know how to fix this, I admitted, my voice small. I don't know if I can fix this. I don't know how to go back to them after what I've done. Tony's grip on my hand tightened, his eyes earnest as he searched mine. Ashley, what we did doesn't erase everything else. But I know it's not simple. I don't expect it to be. But you've got to figure out what you want. What's going to make you whole again? I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that this could be a turning point, that I could find my way back to the balance I was seeking, but the truth was, I didn't know what I wanted anymore. All I knew was that I couldn't pretend I wasn't torn. Torn between a past I had tried to leave behind and a future I wasn't sure I was ready for. I'm so sorry, I whispered, my heart heavy. I need time to figure this out. I need to think. Tony nodded, his expression softening. Take all the time you need. I'm here, Ashley. You don't have to decide anything right now. As I lay back down beside him, I felt an overwhelming sense of confusion. I had come here to close a chapter of my life, to tie up loose ends with the house. But instead, I had opened a whole new world of uncertainty, one that I wasn't sure I was ready to navigate. The flight back to New York felt like a blur, the entire journey swallowed by the weight of what had happened. The hum of the airplane, the churning thoughts inside my mind, and the unfamiliar sting in my chest, it all seemed to blend together in a haze of confusion. As the plane touched down in New York, I felt like a stranger in my own life. I hadn't known what to expect when I left for my hometown, a quick trip, some business to finalize. But instead, I was returning to a life that no longer felt as solid as it had before. I couldn't shake the image of Tony's face, the way he had held me, and the truth that now lingered between us, the truth of what I had done. When I walked into our apartment, the familiar scent of coffee and fresh linens greeted me, but it didn't bring the comfort I had hoped for. I dropped my suitcase near the door, my eyes scanning the space for the warmth I had left behind. Mom. Emma's voice rang out as she came rushing toward me, her small arms flinging around my waist. I knelt down, holding her close, but the tightness in my chest made it hard to fully relax into the moment. Hey, sweet girl, I said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. I kissed the top of her head, trying to remind myself of the love I had for her, for David. How was your trip? She asked eagerly, her eyes wide with excitement. I smiled, but it felt forced. It was good. I got a lot done. David appeared from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. Hey, you're back. How was everything? His voice was warm, concerned, but I could hear the underlying question in his tone, the one that wasn't being said, the one that I wasn't ready to answer. It was, fine, I said, my voice a little too quiet. My mind was still far away, trapped in memories of a man I couldn't shake. David tilted his head, narrowing his eyes. Are you okay? He stepped closer, his expression softening as he reached out to touch my arm. You seem off. I froze. I could feel the weight of my guilt pressing against my ribs, making it hard to breathe. How could I lie to him? How could I pretend everything was fine when it wasn't? I had just crossed a line I never thought I would, and now, here I was, back with the family I had almost forgotten to appreciate, trying to figure out how to make sense of it all. I'm fine, I said, but the lie tasted bitter in my mouth. Just a lot on my mind. David didn't look convinced, but he let it go, his expression still laced with concern. Well, I'm glad you're home. We've missed you. I missed you too, I whispered, but even as the words left my mouth, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was lying. To him. To myself. The evening passed in a blur of normalcy. Dinner was a quiet affair, Emma chattering about school, David asking me about my trip, all the while, I kept glancing at my phone, waiting for a message, an acknowledgement, anything from Tony. But there was nothing. He had given me space, and I knew I should appreciate that, but the silence between us felt unbearable. After dinner, I tucked Emma into bed, the soft glow of her nightlight casting a peaceful halo over her face. I kissed her goodnight, my heart aching as I wondered how much longer I could keep pretending that everything was fine. Back in the living room, David sat down on the couch, watching me carefully as I took a seat next to him. You know you can talk to me, right? He said, his voice soft but serious. About anything. If something's bothering you. I'm here. I stared at the floor, unable to meet his eyes. The words were right there on the tip of my tongue, the truth of what had happened in my hometown, the guilt that had taken root in my chest. But I couldn't say it. Not yet. I know, I whispered, my voice barely audible. I just need a little time to figure some things out. David nodded, his expression still full of concern. Okay. Just don't shut me out. I won't, I promised, even though I wasn't sure I could keep it. The truth was, I didn't know how to navigate this. I didn't know how to deal with the storm raging inside me. That night, as I lay in bed beside David, I could feel the distance between us. Not physical, but emotional. My mind was elsewhere, and my heart was no longer fully his. It felt like a betrayal in the quiet of the dark, and I couldn't escape it. The ghost of Tony lingered in the back of my mind, reminding me of everything I had left behind, and everything I was starting to question. Days passed, but the weight of the decision I had been avoiding didn't lighten. If anything, it grew heavier with each passing moment. I had returned to my family, and on the surface everything was the same. The comforting rhythm of everyday life, David's quiet presence, Emma's joyful laughter, was supposed to bring me peace. But the tension I felt, the tug between two worlds, was impossible to ignore. I tried to bury the thoughts of Tony. I told myself it was a moment of weakness, a lapse in judgment that I'd soon move past. But deep down, I knew that was a lie. The connection between us, the unfinished business, it lingered, not in a fleeting, casual way, but in a way that was undeniable. I found myself staring at my phone more often than I should have, wondering if I'd hear from him again. But as each day passed with silence, I began to realize something. I was waiting for permission to make a decision. A decision I was too scared to make on my own. But then, one morning, as the soft light of the early hours filtered through the window, I knew. I had to make a choice. I couldn't keep living in this space between two worlds, two versions of myself. I either had to fully commit to my family, to the life I had built with David and Emma, or I had to face the fact that something had changed within me, something that couldn't be undone. That day, as I sat across from David at the kitchen table, the weight of it all felt unbearable. His eyes were gentle, concerned, as he reached for my hand. Ashley, he said softly, his voice full of love but edged with uncertainty. You've been distant. I know something's wrong. Whatever it is, you don't have to carry it alone. I could feel the lump in my throat, the struggle to find the right words. I wanted to be honest. I needed to be. But how could I explain the ache in my chest, the pull toward a past I thought I had left behind? I'm not okay, David, I finally admitted, my voice shaking. I've been carrying something for a while now. Something I didn't know how to talk to you about. I made a mistake. His expression didn't change, but I could see the hurt flash across his face, the pain of not knowing what was coming. What do you mean, a mistake? I closed my eyes, steadying myself. I went back to my hometown. I saw Tony. And, something happened. Something I can't just ignore. I don't know how to explain it, but it's changed everything. I feel like I betrayed you, and I can't pretend I don't feel it. David's face softened, but his eyes clouded with sadness. You slept with him, didn't you? The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I didn't want to confirm it, but I couldn't lie. Yes, I whispered. I did. And I regret it. I regret it so much, but I couldn't deny what I felt when I saw him again. It's like everything I buried came rushing back. David sat back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. The silence between us felt suffocating. I had expected anger, disappointment, even betrayal, but there was only sadness. A sadness that mirrored my own. I don't know what to say to that, he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. I don't know if I can forgive you. I understand, I said, my voice small. I don't expect you to. I just need you to know the truth. I owe you that. For a long moment, he didn't say anything, just stared at his hands on the table. Then he looked up at me, his eyes filled with a quiet resolve. I think I need some time to figure out what I want, too. I can't pretend this didn't hurt, Ashley. But I still love you. I just don't know if I can move past this. And just like that, the decision was no longer just mine to make. David had his own choice to face, and in that moment, I realized that my actions had put both of us at a crossroads. That night, I stayed up late, lying in bed and thinking. I had to decide what mattered most to me, the family I had built, the life I had with David and Emma, or the unresolved past with Tony. I couldn't keep holding on to both. It wasn't easy. It wasn't quick. But the answer became clear over the course of the following days. Tony represented something I had left behind, a chapter of my life that I couldn't erase. But the truth was, I had a life here now, a life with David and Emma, one that I couldn't take for granted. It wasn't perfect, and I knew I had hurt David in ways I couldn't undo. But I also knew that I wanted to try to make things right with him. The next morning, I texted Tony. I need to focus on my family right now. I don't know what the future holds, but I can't keep going back to the past. I hope you understand. It was painful, more painful than I had imagined. But I knew it was the right choice. Tony had been a part of my past, and as much as I'd wanted to see where it could have gone, I realized that I needed to build a future with the people who mattered most. That afternoon, I sat down with David again. I've made a decision, I said, my voice steady but uncertain. I want to work on us. I want to try to rebuild what we've had. I'm sorry for what I did, and I know it's not going to be easy, but I want to make it right. David didn't say anything at first. He just looked at me, his gaze soft but guarded. Finally, he nodded. I'm willing to try, Ashley. But we've both got a lot of work to do. And with that, I knew the road ahead wouldn't be simple. It would be messy, and there would be moments where I'd question everything. But for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was finally making the right choice for the right reasons.